strategy is very clear, certainly on North Korea.
It wasn't clear to me really what the United States was striving to achieve.
It's different than past national security strategy.
Is that meaning that military options are at the forefront?
A massive retaliation to any North Korean attack on the United States.
We're just not going to sit here and watch it happen.
Being a progressive president in Seoul and a conservative president in Washington.
I would hope that Pyongyang does not view this as a sign of weakness.
The White House says North Korea is directly responsible for the WannaCry malware attack.
This is criminal behavior.
From the Voice of America, this is Washington Talk.
Hello, welcome to Washington Talk. I'm Eunjang Cho. We bring you insights and analysis on North Korea issues every week from Washington. This week, we'll first discuss whether Washington and Seoul are on the same page in dealing with North Korea. President Trump announced a blueprint for the national security, signaling strong pressure against North Korea. This while South Korean President Moon Jae-in proposed delay in military drills to ensure peaceful Winter Olympics.
Our campaign of maximum pressure on the North Korean regime has resulted in the toughest ever sanctions. However, there is much more work to do.
Now, my guest today, Ambassador Joseph Ditrani, former special envoy to the six-party talks during the Bush administration. And he also served as the director for the National Counterproliferation Center.
That's correct.
Welcome.
Welcome, thank you.
Also joining us today, Mr. Frank Januzzi, president of the Mansfield Foundation, who also served as an advisor to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good
It's great seeing
morning. Ambassador, let me begin with you. What is the national security strategy? How can we predict future actions out of this document?
I think the strategy is very clear, certainly on North Korea, where the president, this administration, has made it very clear that this is priority number one for the United States, but also for our allies and partners. And there will be a policy, a strong policy of if you will, pressure. You use the word pressure, and that's the element of containment, where North Korea is going to be facing additional sanctions because we see a lot of the money that they acquire through trade and other means going into their nuclear and missile programs. There's going to be that element there. But there will also be another element, which is a very important one, which is deterrence. Mm-hmm. A strong showing of the U.S. commitment with our allies, certainly South Korea, Japan, that we will not tolerate any misbehavior on the part of North Korea. Mm-hmm. And in the context of that reality, missile defense would be very, very central to what this administration is looking at. So I think we'll see more on the sanctions side of the ledger, more on the deterrence side, but a greater emphasis on missile defense. Mm-hmm. But let me emphasize this also, and the option of an off-ramp, where North Korea can move towards dialogue and negotiations with the United States and South Korea and Japan, and seek a peaceful resolution to these issues.
Mm-hmm. Frank, did you see an off-ramp from this document?
Well, I think there's an off-ramp, but I think that the national security strategy, as announced by the president, mostly focuses on the tools, as Joe laid out. Pressure, sanctions, deterrence, missile defense. And what I felt was lacking in the document was enough about the end goals. It wasn't clear to me really what the United States was striving to achieve beyond the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, which of course is an important strategic objective, can only be accomplished in the context of a wider settlement of the issues of a divided peninsula. So I think this document lays out the priorities and the tools of the U.S. I think it creates a sense of urgency about the North Korean issue that may have been lacking from some of the previous national security strategies that the United States has had. But I feel like it's missing an important component in terms of what are we really striving for? Is the U.S. goal unification? Is the U.S. goal to live at peace with North Korea in perpetuity? I think some of that long-term vision still needs to be fleshed out.
Frank, in this national security strategy, it uses strong words against North Korea, where it's like, we'll respond with overwhelming force to North Korean aggression, we will compel denuclearization in North Korea. So what is this saying? Is that meaning that military options are at the forefront? How should we expect future actions on this?
Well, you know, when diplomats say that all options are on the table, what they really mean is we're reminding everyone that force is one of those options. So this national security strategy is a little bit more forceful in its rhetoric. I don't read too much into those strong words. I think that's more the Trump administration wanting to feel like they're taking a tougher position than their predecessor. I don't think you'll see that play out in a meaningful way day to day.
Ambassador, how do you compare this year's national security strategy to the previous administration's ones?
In the context of what we've seen over this past year with North Korea, over 23 missile launches and a nuclear event which was a so-called hydrogen bomb test. This is very, very significant to include in that 23 missile launches an ICBM with the capability of reaching, if you were Washington, D.C., the whole of the continental U.S. We've seen North Korea going way beyond the pale. So I think what we see in this national security strategy is a sense, I wouldn't say of frustration, but a sense that this has got to stop. What North Korea has been doing, they've gone just too far. And with the rhetoric and with the nuclear tests and with the missile launches and also with cyber and some of the other activities coming out of North Korea, I think it's different than past security, national security strategies in the sense that it's saying we've reached a point where this has to be resolved. And as Mr. Jannucci said, all options are on the table. Indeed, we're all hopeful that it's the peaceful negotiations option, but that doesn't preclude the other options. And I think it's important for North Korea to understand that. And I think it would be a terrible mistake on the part of Pyongyang if they think this is open rhetoric on the part of the U.S. and there's nothing behind it. I think they have to understand that there is a great deal of frustration, but also anxiety that North Korea may do something given their proven capabilities, missiles and nuclear and some of the others. They may do something and there will be a significant response. And we will be going into a very dangerous period of time.
North Korea is one of the top national security priorities to the Trump administration right now.
Exactly.
And you mentioned about a lot of missile launches. This document mentions about strengthening missile defense. What is the implication to South Korea? Because South Korea openly said that it rejects joining the U.S. missile shield.
I'm not sure that there's any space between South Korea and the U.S. on missile defense per se. This is something that has to obviously be fully discussed before. I would think President Moon Jae-in has made it very clear that missile defense is important. And I know we hear a lot about the 3 no's, and that's part of the 3 no's, that there will be no additional THAAD deployments. But I'm hopeful, and I think many others are, that this is an issue that is still being discussed and explored. Because if North Korea continues with their missile launches and their nuclear tests, I find it hard to believe that we would say we're comfortable with the missile defense system we have in place. I would think we would probably want to enhance that, given the threat, the potential threat coming out of North Korea.
Frank, do you agree with Ambassador?
Well, look, I think that missile defense is an essential component of deterrence. I agree with Joe that it's not a settled question. The security situation on the peninsula is fluid, and as the threat increases, the U.S. and South Korea and Japan are going to respond. What I do worry about is a sense of overconfidence, perhaps, on the part of some in the administration or among the American people about the capabilities of the missile defenses that we already have deployed. Deterrence is not a reason to avoid diplomacy, and missile defense are not a substitute for effective engagement with the North to try to reduce the threat diplomatically.
I couldn't agree with you more on that. But the fact of the matter is we have missile defense capabilities and they will be used. And I think North Korea, my personal view, if North Korea were to launch an ICBM, And there's no sense as to what's on the tip of that ICBM. And it's viewed as an imminent threat to South Korea, Japan, or the United States. I think we have no option but to take it down, or at least
do our best
attempt
to
take it
try,
down.
of course.
Now, my view is, hopefully we will succeed. But even if we don't succeed, we're telling North Korea very clearly, if it's viewed as an imminent threat, we're just not going to sit there and watch it happen. That's important.
Right. I want to contrast the positions from Washington and Seoul too, because from Washington there was strong words on North Korea this week, whereas from Seoul, the South Korean President Moon Jae-in said he wants to delay the military drill with the United States until after the Winter Olympics. What is his motivation on that, Ambassador?
Well, you know, I can see where President Moon Jae-in is coming from on that. We have the Winter Olympics.
That's right.
Everyone wants it to be in a peaceful environment because it's such a special event. Going back to the Seoul Olympics in 1988, and we saw the Korean Airlines coming down, perpetrated by the North Koreans at that time, which encouraged the U.S. to put North Korea on the terrorism list. I would think President Moon Jae-in is saying this should never happen. So let's do everything possible to ensure that this does not happen.
Frank.
Well, look, this is a short-term priority difference rather than a strategic difference. I certainly hope the United States would respect his wishes. Our readiness is at a high level. It's not inappropriate for us to consider a postponement or a scaling back of these exercises. Ideally, North Korea would be the country that would also suggest such a cessation. And that North Korea would at least reciprocate such a gesture. We'll have to wait and see.
Frank, you said you would hope that Washington will accept this, but do you think it will accept it? Do you think there is an understanding between Seoul and Washington that this, are there in discussions that this will be delayed?
I'm not sure that they've reached an agreement yet, and I think it may yet depend on North Korea's actions over the next few weeks.
I would hope that Pyongyang does not view this as a sign of weakness.
Right.
That we're sort of in some way
It's a sign of strength.
placating them. Yes,
No, we're ready for them.
That's exactly because I think we've seen in the past when we've shown any weakness on the part of relations and dealing with provocative actions coming out of North Korea persisted and escalated.
Yeah.
And it should go the other way.
Yeah.
They should respond in kind by saying, yes, this makes eminent sense. This is a unique a period of time with the Winter Olympics, and
Indeed.
we also will sort of embrace this initiative of President Moon Jae-in.
My final question on this topic to both of you, first to Frank and then to Ambassador. Is there a gap between Seoul and Washington on this approach to North Korea currently?
When President Moon was elected last year, or I guess earlier this year, there was great concern in Washington that having a progressive president in Seoul and a conservative president in Washington might lead to tension over North Korea policy. I think most people have been reassured by President Trump's visit to Seoul and by the pragmatic approach followed by President Moon, that there is no serious gap between Washington and Seoul, but I think it's still a work in progress. And the pressure and engagement strategy of the Trump administration needs to have both of those elements if it's going to remain in close alignment with President Moon.
Ambassador, is
No,
there a gap?
I don't think there is a gap, but I can tell you this, North Korea would love to see a gap. They would love to put a wedge between the United States and South Korea on issues certainly pertaining to North Korea and their nuclear program. But I believe there isn't. So no, I think we're in sync on that, but we shouldn't take that for granted. We should work to ensure that we're always in sync, and that's important.
We'll have to wrap the first topic here and move on to our second topic.
The United States is publicly attributing the massive WannaCry cyber attack to North Korea. Microsoft traced the attack to cyber affiliates of North Korean government. This was a careless and reckless attack.
The White House says North Korea is directly responsible for the WannaCry malware attack that hit 300,000 computers in 150 countries in May. The White House vowed to hold North Korea accountable for its actions. Now, Frank, first question to you. What is the significance of this announcement coming from the White House? I mean, the private sector already pointed to North Korea already.
Look, to me, North Korea's growing cyber capabilities are a real threat. And the White House is seeking additional sanctions against North Korea in the United Nations. But I think what we really need to focus on is the asymmetric capabilities of North Korea to inflict harm on South Korea, the United States, and how we can best prepare for that and respond to that. The whole North Korean economy is only about $50 billion US dollars. But through a massive cyber attack on international commerce or finance or communications, the North could inflict that kind of damage on the planet in a week. So we need to be both hardening our defenses against cyber, but also finding ways to strike back or to degrade their own cyber capabilities. And by pointing the finger so clearly at North Korea, the administration is adding to the long list of grievances that the United States has with North Korea, adding potentially to the agenda for any negotiations that would eventually take place to try to address the long list of concerns we have.
Ambassador, this time was a ransomware. So is this somehow related to the ongoing international sanctions drive?
I don't think it's related to sanctions, no. This is the element of North Korea's illicit activities. When they feel they can, in this case, they would be acquiring some resources, which they obviously always need, and sanctions are biting to a great extent, so they'll be doing more of that. But that's an interesting point. North Korea has always been involved with, and this has always been an issue between the United States and North Korea, but certainly South Korea, Japan, and North Korea, their illicit activities. Whether it was the counterfeiting of the $100 note, whether it was counterfeiting pharmaceuticals, counterfeiting cigarettes, methamphetamine, and now we're talking about WannaCry, ransomware, where they're actually going in, not only like with Sony Pictures, to acquire the product and to destroy it after they acquired it, but also maybe to get some resources on this. This is criminal behavior. This should not be emanating from a nation state. So yes, this is very serious. And as Frank correctly indicated, we're talking about asymmetrical. They have a whole menu of asymmetrical capabilities in addition to the missiles and the nuclear and so forth that they are using, not that they could use, that they are using. And that's very troublesome. That's why we need to sit down and talk to them.
Yeah.
Frank, do you expect executive order, further sanctions on North Korea directly related to this ransomware incident?
Almost certainly. There will be, as NSA and the U.S. government tracks which entities were specifically responsible, I think you'll see additional named sanctions, named companies. You may see attempts to lock them out of the international finance system and other such executive orders. But at the end of the day, it's going to be hard to control it from outside.
We'll have to end this conversation here and move on to our next segment. Now, time for the photo moment, a time to look at an interesting North Korea picture. Now, picture this week is a cartoon titled Detour. This cartoon shows Santa Claus and an elf riding on a reindeer sleigh going above the North Korean skies. And the elf goes, "I told you we should have detoured around North Korea." We can also see a big missile with a North Korean flag on it. Now, this was on a U.S. cartoon syndicate, Kaggle. Frank, what is your reaction to this?
Well, North Korea's got this habit of celebrating important holidays in the United States with missile launches. I think July 4th has been a favorite time for them to launch recently. Let's hope it's not going to be Christmas Eve that we see a missile disrupting Santa's journey. And I hope maybe the new year will bring a different excuse to pay attention to North Korea, something peaceful and not as dramatic as a missile test.
Ambassador, what is your reaction to this cartoon?
We've seen it on the 4th of July, we've seen it on other holidays. This is not what you want to do. Because I think North Korea has to truly understand that the international community, certainly South Korea, Japan, the United States, but the international community is very, very upset with North Korea's behavior. And to do something at a time like this, of that nature, would truly be beyond the pale, and there would be significant consequences. So you don't want to go down that road.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week. Ambassador, thank you for
thank you.
joining us.
Thank you.
Frank, thank you for joining us as always.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And this was Washington Talk from VOA, and I'm Eunjang Cho. See you next week.